tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
As of 1:45 p.m. today, VPD officers had responded to more than 65 sudden deaths since Friday.
A large number of the calls that we're going to are seniors that live alone.
Police report a spike in sudden deaths as BC's blistering heat wave continues.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Check on your seniors, your elderly, your neighbors.
Paramedics fear chaos. Also,
we were reaching temperatures over 45 degrees Celsius behind the line.
Sweltering at work, why restaurant owners are asking for your patience as customers return to eat. And
we are now ready to move on to the next stage.
Mask orders down, normal gatherings allowed. BC is moving to stage 3 of its COVID reopening plan, July 1st.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Anita is on assignment tonight. BC's extreme heat wave could now be playing a role in hundreds of deaths. Police across Metro Vancouver say they have responded to dozens of sudden deaths in just the past few days. And as Johanna Da Silva reports, emergency responders are stretched to their limits.
More casualties being reported by the hour.
The Vancouver Police Department can't keep up, responding to one death after another.
3 to 4 per day is the average that we attend. Since Friday, VPD has responded to an average of 14 sudden deaths a day. Quite simply, it's stretching our resources very thin.
Today, 20 by this afternoon alone, with more than a dozen calls still in the queue.
We're also dealing with family members and working to console family members who are distraught, having just discovered a loved one, whether it be a family member or a neighbor or somebody who's very important to them, who's tragically died.
And that tragic story extends across the province.
A large number of the calls that we're going to are seniors that live alone, and our officers are finding that when they are entering the buildings, the rooms that they're living in are in the 40-degree temperature level.
The large number of these sudden deaths involve seniors between the ages of 92 to 70. The youngest person that we have had is a 44-year-old person.
Emergency crews are stretched. At one point today, there was a 45-minute wait to speak to police after calling 911. Then there is the wait for an ambulance.
Up to 2 hours for high-level priority calls. People are waiting, over an hour on a regular basis right now, and I've heard up to 12-15 hours for non-emergency calls.
And as the heat continues, families like the Hadanis have been camped out at a daytime cooling center and constantly checking in on grandparents after a long, hot night.
I call them, hey, are you guys ready? Would you like to go to the cooling area?
And Susanna joins us with more. Susie, do we have any sense of the deadly numbers across the province?
Well, the BC Coroner Service now says over the last 4 days, there have been 233 sudden deaths. That's almost twice as many over the normal or average period of time. Now, of course, all of those deaths are delaying things throughout the system. The VPD, for instance, says when they do respond to a sudden death, they have to wait for the Coroner Service to arrive. That is delayed. That then delays the VPD from being able to respond elsewhere in the city.
So what more are those emergency crews doing to respond to this crisis?
Well, the VPD, for instance, is redeploying officers from other departments or even calling some officers in from home to be able to deal with this. It's the same story by other departments. They're also checking in on some of the more vulnerable populations, but they are asking everyone to check in on your loved ones, check in on neighbors, anyone who may be elderly, senior, living alone, immunocompromised, have health issues, to check on them, to make sure they're staying cool, offer to take them to cooling centers, somewhere else that is cooler, but to continuously be checking on them to ensure they are doing well. Dan?
Johanna Da Silva, thank you. Well, as we know, another hot, uncomfortable, sticky day for people across our province. For those who have to work in this heat, there is very little relief. Michelle Gassoub joins us now from Vancouver. Michelle, how are workers coping?
Well, Dan, it's hard enough to stay cool in your own home right now, but it's a whole other situation for people who don't have that option. WorkSafe BC is urging employers to send their employees home if they're unable to protect them from heat stress, and some workplaces are just sweltering hot. Think about a restaurant kitchen. super hot even on a normal day. And now think about when you add in temperatures in the high 30s.
You've probably heard the term, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. That term is actually incredibly literal. With all that equipment being turned on, even with the hood vents sucking the air out, it's still going to be really hot. We are fortunate enough that we have air conditioning in all of our spaces, but yesterday we were reaching temperatures over 45 degrees Celsius behind the line. One of the biggest things that we've made sure to do is to have extra people on so that we can tag people out for breaks whenever they need, and also to keep a stock of rags rotating through our freezer, cold rags, just to keep everybody's body temperature as cold as possible.
Now, many people are heading to restaurants to try to take advantage of that AC, also because people don't even want to turn on their stoves or ovens at home. And if that's part of your plan to stay cool, here's something to keep in mind.
Be mindful of the fact that we might move a little bit slower. We're going to take care of ourselves and our safety at the same time as trying to produce everything for everyone.
And another group that we're hearing from, welders, construction workers, anyone who has to be out in this heat and that heavy protective equipment, is absolutely punishing. Many of them were actually sent home from their work sites today because it was deemed to be too dangerous for them to be working. Everyone at this point just hoping for some relief. Dan?
Michelle Gassoub joining us. Thank you very much. A wildfire near Kamloops has prompted an evacuation order now for several homes.
Guys, looks like we gotta go.
The BC Wildfire Service says the fire, likely caused by people, broke out on Monday and has ballooned to an estimated 750 hectares. It's one of two out-of-control wildfires now burning in the interior. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe now joins us with a first look at the forecast. Joe, first of all, this wildfire risk across our province, this is startling how fast it's become.
It is scary stuff, Dan, especially as we watch lightning strikes pop up across the province. Until today, any new fire starts would have been human-caused. We have seen over 20 new fire starts just at the latest update in the past couple of days. I want to show you a picture of a scary scene just over an hour ago in the Okanagan near Naramata. You are looking at a developing, towering thunderstorm cell. This is a cumulus punching through the heat dome. It has to be so strong to push through that sinking air. A lot of people asking, is this connected to a fire? This is a thunderstorm cell associated with that rising hot air, and you can just see it in the interior. There's a couple lightning strikes and then that puff of cloud. That's the top of the thunderstorm cell punched into the upper atmosphere. And then look at all that lightning happening in the north. This is as our heat dome shifts eastward, opening up the doors to some instability. I was really concerned about this cell. It does look like we did get some good rain with it, but lightning strikes also a part of that story. This is going to be something we're watching over the next couple of days as we continue to sit under this heat dome. We are getting some relief here on the south coast. That is going to be a big deal for those of us who have been under that oppressive heat dome for days now. Marine air will make a difference tomorrow. This is still hot, though. I'm going to take you through the forecast coming up, but the air quality, the other part of this story, Dan, the oppressive heat, risk of a runaway wildfire event over the next 24 hours, and air quality is awful. It is one of the worst air quality readings we've seen in some time. That is what you're looking at when you see that brown haze over the city. I'll be back later on with more details.
All right. Thanks very much, Joe. And later on, we'll be hearing from a doctor at the BC Centre for Disease Control, Sarah Henderson, about the health impacts of these extreme weather events. BC is officially moving to stage 3 of reopening out of the pandemic on Canada Day as planned. Our Tanya Fletcher joins us now with what this means. Tanya, what kind of easing are we going to be seeing with these restrictions now?
Yeah, Dan, the provincial state of emergency, which has been in place since March of 2020, will finally be lifted on July 1st. And that's when many of the public health orders will fall as well, including the mask mandate. So face coverings will no longer be required, but still recommended until you're fully immunized. There will be no size limits on indoor or outdoor personal gatherings with friends and family. family. That means kids can have sleepovers with friends once again. And organized indoor gatherings like sporting events can open up to 50% capacity or 50 people, whichever is greater. For outdoor events, that's expanded to 5,000 people or 50% capacity, whichever is bigger. Also come July 1st, fairs and festivals can resume. Sports and exercise facilities can go back to normal. All of those, though, with safety plans in place. Recreational travel across Canada has once again been given the okay, and Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry says this is all a cautious move forward.
The important principle that we have right now is that we no longer need to have orders and directives in place, and we can remove those and replace them with the guidance that allows us to live our lives as we move through this next step in the reopening.
Tanya, what's changing for businesses, especially those that have been forced to remain closed throughout this pandemic?
Yeah, Dan, this is a significant shift as well. Take a look. So first, let's start with restaurants, bars, and pubs. Those have been able to stay open, but now there's no limit on group dining sizes. Those rules can be set by the establishment, and liquor service will return to normal hours. Venues can host events, but mingling between tables still won't be allowed. Now, come Thursday, nightclubs and casinos can also reopen. Never thought we'd see this day, at least not yet, but with reduced capacity and measures like barriers and distancing still in place. Meanwhile, at least one epidemiologist says transmissibility in this type of back to normal life will remain the biggest unknown, especially with those variants.
We don't really know what the transmissibility looks like in a reopened Canadian population. We haven't ever exposed our variants to that kind of population before, so we need to be thinking about monitoring to see, if strains are escaping vaccination or if transmission's getting too high.
Now, remember, this phase was all predicated on low case counts, declining hospitalizations, and first dose vaccinations among adults at 70%. We've passed all of those metrics with flying colors. That means our sights are now set on the final phase set for September 7th. And one final note, Dan, today also marked the last regularly scheduled COVID briefing of the pandemic.
They have dominated our news cycle and every day, and we'll wait to see what happens next. Tanya Fletcher, thanks very much. As step 3 of BC's restart plan kicks off, Vancouver International Airport is gearing up for a rise in passengers.
Here at YVR, it's our job not only to implement these changes and measures, but also to keep the community informed about what the journey will look like when we can all start to travel again.
Passengers are asked to read up on each province or territory's travel requirements. International travelers will still have to undergo a more elaborate process, including mandatory testing. But starting July 5th, fully vaccinated travelers entering Canada will no longer have to quarantine in a hotel. Masks will still be required at all times, though, as per federal law. Meanwhile, 29 new cases of COVID-19 were announced in BC today, tied for the lowest daily total since August 4th. And more good news, no one died from the disease in the past 24 hours. 110 people are in hospital, 34 in intensive care. More than 31% of adults in BC are now fully vaccinated. It is a much different story for BC's first public health emergency. We have set yet another record for overdose deaths from poison drugs, many laced with fentanyl. The coroner's service says 851 people died between January and May, more deaths than any other year during that same time. 160 lives were lost in the last month alone, the second worst May ever recorded, and the 15th consecutive month in which the province had more than 100 deaths. To other news now. The federal government has dealt a major blow to BC's commercial salmon fishing industry, announcing it will shut down more than half of commercial fisheries for the year. As Katie Nicholson tells us, they hope the move will increase the number of salmon, but some are not convinced it will work.
And when the fish bite, you can hear them on the bells up when they're ringing.
Frank Keach has fished these waters for 4 decades. Some of the salmon from his boat go right here to his food truck, or at least that was the plan.
Now with these closures, we just don't know where we stand and what we're going to do.
Today, the minister responsible for fisheries and oceans announced sweeping closures to the commercial salmon fishery. 60% now shuttered for the season.
We can't fish it until it's completely gone, and that's the point we're getting to.
Some fear this is the beginning of the end.
It's a tragic day for the industry, I think for the coast, for all British Columbians and really for Canadians. This is an industry that grew up with this province, and we are now looking at very close to the end of it.
But that's exactly what the move hopes to avoid, buying time to allow stocks to rebound.
No one measure can kind of return salmon populations to their historical numbers.
It's a good first step, but advocates say overfishing isn't the only thing threatening salmon.
Whether it's pollution, industrial runoff, increased water temperatures due to climate change, obstructions like dams, all of that is threatening.
For some, the survival of salmon is about more than industry.
Salmon have always been part of our community and of all First Nations up and down the coast. And if we lose that, we're losing part of our identity.
Part of the DFO plan also involves retiring or buying back licenses, leaving some wondering what is a fair price for a livelihood.
You know, what do you put a price tag on something we've built up our whole lives?
Answers, like the salmon, are still scarce. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Vancouver.
A Vancouver man has now been sentenced to 18 months in prison for killing an elderly shopper outside Costco more than 3 years ago. Thomas Toth, who's now in his 60s, was accused of pushing the victim, an 86-year-old, to the ground during a fight. Orlando Ocampo was rushed to hospital but later died from his injuries. Meng Wanzhou appeared in BC Supreme Court today for the first time in months. The Huawei executive's lawyers are trying to convince the judge overseeing her extradition hearing to consider evidence that they believe could turn the case on its head. As Jason Proctor tells us, the new evidence relates to a mysterious trove of documents from Hong Kong.
Meng Wanzhou's lawyers started their arguments today by pointing out just how unusual her situation is. A Hong Kong court approved the release of thousands of pages of documents this spring from HSBC, the alleged victim in American fraud charges against Meng. The US claims she lied to the bank about Huawei's control of a subsidiary that was accused of violating US economic sanctions against Iran, and that HSBC relied on Meng's lies to continue financing Huawei, putting the bank at risk of prosecution and massive fines. Now, Meng's lawyers say they have internal documents from HSBC that show the US record of the case is a false narrative, that senior executives knew the full extent of Huawei's dealings and made their financial decisions anyway, without considering what Meng did or didn't tell them. Meng's lawyer said what's rare is that Meng now has the same documents the US did when it assured Canada there was enough evidence to extradite Meng to face trial. And in fact, she can prove that the US omitted facts and misrepresented the truth, or at least they say she can if the judge decides to allow the documents into evidence. And that may prove difficult, because prosecutors say the HSBC documents are the type of evidence she can use to prove herself innocent at trial, if she's extradited, but not at this hearing. Extradition is supposed to be a speedy process, and to make it quick, the US's version of facts is taken at face value, unless the defense can prove that record is manifestly unreliable, which they say these documents will do. There are only 2 days slated for this hearing, and then the final 3 weeks of Meng's extradition proceedings take place at the start of August. Jason Proctor, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Royal BC Museum is now apologizing after reports found racism and discrimination at that facility.
To be frank, these 2 reports show that we are not the museum we wanted to be, and we're not the museum we should be.
The museum went under investigation last year after its head of Indigenous collections resigned. Lucy Bell cited acts of racism and discrimination against Indigenous team members and other people of color. The museum also admits their core galleries on human history are outdated and in some cases offensive. The museum board says they will provide more training for diversity and inclusion and plan more
the Royal
inclusive
BC Museum
exhibits. To wrap up Filipino Heritage Month this June, it's worth noting it coincides with National Indigenous History Month. Both groups experienced trauma from colonization. And in light of recent findings at Canada's former residential schools, the CBC's Michelle Elliott shows us how Filipinos are showing their solidarity.
Hoy!
This is Mandy Nahaney and Babette Santos. They've been friends and are working to share each other's Indigenous cultures for 2 decades. Nahaney is singing Snowbird by Cecilia, a Squamish matriarch. Nahaney is from the Squamish and Nisga'a nations. Santos is dancing a traditional Bagobo Tagabawa dance from the Philippines, and they are second-generation Filipinx of mixed heritage. Santos is working to promote Indigenous cultures from the Philippines, but Filipino Canadians aren't always aware or interested in their Indigenous roots, as they have diminished over centuries of colonization. They hope more Filipinos will reconnect with those roots and, in turn, make a connection with Indigenous peoples in Canada.
For me, it's all about understanding the roots of Indigenous identity in the Philippines is a journey towards knowing more about myself. Because if we go back six generations, we have Indigenous blood, and it's hard to accept it. And who am I going to accept that more with Mandy, who's been decolonizing for a long time?
Many Filipinos are calling on each other to support Indigenous people in Canada. Beth Dolyaga says Filipinos, many of whom are Catholic due to Spanish colonization, must support survivors of residential schools.
It's not just asking for the church as an institution for an apology, but also to indemnify families and survivors of these residential schools. And we have to stand with them.
As Filipinos, we understand the concept of being thankful and appreciation for what we have. And part of that is recognizing the privileges we have as settlers on Indigenous land.
Bob Joseph provides training on Indigenous relations. He says Filipinos and others can take specific first steps.
You could go and find the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action and just have a read through there. And personally, look for one that fits yourself, and then do that little bit of work where we are taking the time to learn about the history and the culture and the UN Declaration, and then involve your church groups and your places of business, your government organization. Those would be helpful things to do.
You were on that sea bus. Good to see you.
For Nahaney, it means working together in meaningful ways and actively involving Indigenous people in events and gatherings, making friendships, and finding a common bond. With Santos, the shared elements of their Indigenous cultures, like the significance of the canoe, or in Tagalog, bangka, are a source of connection.
And that's what I really love about this relationship, is that it's like we're constantly trying to figure out, how can we go further? How can we go further? How can we do more together? In the same canoe, yeah.
Isang bangka. Isang bangka.
Isang bangka.
Bangka.
Michelle Elliott, CBC News, on the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
We're sharing more of some of the Indigenous languages spoken across Vancouver Island and southwestern BC, and the people working very hard to restore them. A language teacher from the Dididat Community School shares a phrase we all ought to know. Have a listen.
Quaklaksuich, uquakis, chakuba, ditid oxips, iachtakshits cluus, six diadeted. Hello, everybody. My name is Chakuba. I am a DT Dot woman. I come from Cluus. I speak the DT Dot language. One of the phrases that I would like everybody to learn is Uhwa Cluck. Is that you? That is our common greeting for hello. Uhwa Cluck. Uhwa Cluck. We want to have that word normalized everywhere, because whenever you go into grocery stores, restaurants, or see people on the streets, you hear people saying hola and aloha, hello. So just to have it normalized and be in there with all the other languages, uhwa cluck, uhwa cluck.
Ooh, qua, cluck. There you go. A reminder, you can watch this newscast live on CBC Gem. The free app is also where you can find other CBC programs. CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. A grim search for survivors grows more desperate by the hour. We will take you to Miami after this. Thanks for sticking around during our commercial-free live stream tonight. Graduation doesn't have the same pomp and circumstance. It usually does, but that didn't stop staff at a Winnipeg high school from doing their best to make sure every student feels special. Corey Funk spoke with a grad who's also a Governor General's Award winner.
I'm really grateful to be receiving a grad at least, because I mean you always have to look at the brighter side, especially during these times. At least I'm really excited that I got to meet all my teachers the final time, meet my principal, and be here with my family.
You won the Governor General's Award, which I think is like the highest award at the whole school. How does that feel?
It feels amazing. I was not anticipating it. Like there are so many great peers I have, so I was not really expecting to receive it, but I'm really excited and happy to be receiving it. It is especially hard for like an immigrant to socialize in such a diverse community or such a diverse school. It's really hard to find your belonging and all that stuff, and like to make friends. It was especially hard for me because of the pandemic, because everything just shut down and there was no way for me to socialize with my peers and, you know, take part in school clubs and all that. But I think we just made it somehow. It was extremely difficult, and in the end for me it was really hard to manage some courses because I was taking like really hard courses this whole semester. So I think with the support of like the Elmwood staff, it was amazing. And yeah, it was a lot of hard work and dedication towards my studies, but I think it was all worth it in the end. This September, it will be 3 years that we are in Canada. Hello. We came here from Pakistan, immigrated here.
I am feeling so proud today, and I was not expecting this much, but Barira got this target, and I am really, really happy. It is the happiest day of my life.
In September, I'll be going to U of M, and I'll be starting off in University 1 there because I have like so many wide-ranging interests, and I want to like narrow down where I want to go in the future. So hopefully, I'm going to start at U1 and then decide from there where I want to go. I'm just like really grateful and happy to be here with my family and to be getting all these awards. Yeah.
We'll be back in a few moments with more national and international news.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Vancouver Queer Film Festival is back. Enjoy the best in independent queer cinema along with workshops, artist panels, Q&As, and more. Learn more at queerfilmfestival.ca. And never miss a special programming series or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver Inbox and keep connected with us.
Search and rescue efforts continue tonight near Miami in the wake of that devastating condo collapse. The death toll now stands at 12, and many are still missing. And as Katie Simpson reports, there's troubling new evidence about the condition of the building before it fell.
Piece by piece, some 3 million pounds of concrete have been moved from this pile. Yet 6 days in, no additional survivors have been found.
It is a very difficult scene, and they are leaving no stone unturned, and they're going to continue to do that.
The rescue effort remains the priority, though new insight is emerging into why this tragedy may have happened. A letter written by the condo board president in April asked residents for millions of dollars to pay for repairs based on a 2018 inspection that flagged serious structural problems. The observable damage, such as in the garage, has gotten significantly worse since the initial inspection. The concrete deterioration is accelerating, it said. And these photos taken by a contractor 36 hours before the collapse show cracks in the concrete, exposed rebar, and a wet floor in the pool equipment room.
It's a terrible, heartbreaking tragedy.
Senator Marco Rubio says while it's too early to come to any conclusions, all of this must be factored into the investigation.
The most important thing now is they want to make sure that the evidence is preserved, that enough of the building and the right parts of the building are preserved so we can get a full understanding of how this happened.
The tragedy has people here worried about whether their own homes are safe.
I don't know, I get the chills being here. It's actually sad.
Lily Ermas lives in a 13-story building nearby.
It makes you wonder. It truly makes you a little paranoid of what if? You know, what about the water that goes in and leaks down when it's raining that hasn't been fixed? It certainly makes you a little paranoid.
It's not just residents here who are worried. Millions of tourists come to Florida every year, including some 3.5 million Canadians. An urgent building inspection blitz is now underway. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Surfside, Florida.
We have a CBC News exclusive for you on a federal program meant to help Black business owners. The new Black Entrepreneurship Loan Fund offers money to owners of existing small businesses, as well as people looking to start one. But as Travis Danraj reports, entrepreneurs applying for those loans are raising concerns.
Cheryl Sutherland's business, a line of affirmation-inspiring goods, is all about optimism. But when she applied to Ottawa's Black Entrepreneurship Fund, doubts crept in.
What is this performative allyship that we're seeing here?
She is one of several Black business owners who want answers about the almost $300 million loan program.
I went through and I tried to gather as much information as I could, and I couldn't find anything in regards to like repayment terms.
Questions too about the loan application, which asked about sexual orientation.
Who actually put this questionnaire together? To me, it was very intrusive. What else do they need from me? My blood type?
The fund is managed by the Federation of African Canadian Economics.
The organization known as FACE was only formed this year. Headquartered in Montreal, here in Justin Trudeau's riding of Papineau, it is an umbrella organization of Black community-based groups.
So we're glad to be a part of the co-design of a program that allows for us to serve our community.
But there are concerns about how it won the contract.
If it was open and public, either I'm very deaf.
Ryan Knight says his group wanted to bid to manage the fund, but never had a chance.
You don't want the program to get demolished because due process wasn't, they didn't go through due process. And that's what happened with the WE scandal.
And tackling systemic racism is not something that you simply do a request for proposals for.
The minister responsible says the government did not seek out other organizations to manage the fund.
I have confidence in FACE. They have been at the table for months, 8 months, working with Canada's financial institutions.
I feel like there's definitely levels of accountability that need to happen sooner rather than later.
Cheryl Sutherland is waiting for a call about her application. Persistence, part of the territory as a Black business owner in Canada. Travis Danraj, CBC News, Ottawa.
A shocking impact on our medical system. The hit of extreme heat on the health and the disastrous outcomes. That's next.
Hello, Toronto. This is Vancouver calling with 2 promos for Basic Black, and they come your way 5 seconds from now.
The final promo.
Arthur Black here for the very last time to tell you what's coming up on Basic Black this Saturday morning. Yes, Basic Black is about to disappear, but not before you hear our final show recorded live in Thunder Bay last week, and what a blast. You kidding me? Thunder Bay, Las Vegas North?
Sin City, I kid you not.
The final show. After 19 years as the host of CBC Radio's Basic Black, Arthur Black is retiring.
Basic Black Show.
Just felt like the right time to stop. There comes a point, I think, where you stay on too long, you know, and I didn't want that to happen.
A tour of his office gives you a sense of what Black and his show is all about.
The king at his bloated best.
The wacky.
Classic ceramic poodle in blue.
The wild.
This is my talking back scratcher.
And the whimsical.
Wow! We had a contest on Basic Black where we got people to send in the socks that they couldn't find the mate for, and they sent them in by the thousands. So we then had a subsequent contest saying, what are we going to do with all these socks? And a fellow by the name of Ches Snow in St. John's, Newfoundland said, send them to me, and I'll give you a love seat. The country's full of very strange people. I love them all. They all seem to find this show, you know.
Arthur Black got his start with the CBC 30 years ago in Thunder Bay. That's why he returned to that city to do his final show. It's where Basic Black was born. The show moved to Vancouver, becoming the most popular variety show on CBC radio, attracting 600,000 listeners every Saturday morning.
You know what the big secret of our success? We were ignored by the CBC. Nobody tried to improve us. Nobody tried to bring in focus groups, you know, and say how we could improve in the yield and the reach of the show. They just left us alone, and it kind of grew like a mushroom in the dark.
What's in there?
This is for Anna.
Apart from the obvious, missing his colleagues, Arthur Black says he'll miss being behind the microphone.
I made her cry.
It's been part of my life for 30 years now, and it's going to feel very weird not to have. I'm going to feel like one of those old guys with the paper hats with their trousers rolled up, you know, for a while.
Thank you, Arthur.
My dear.
Sudha Krishna, CBC News, Vancouver.
Here are some of the stories we're following for you tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Yesterday we had 15 sudden deaths, and today, so far, we've had 19 sudden deaths that we've responded to.
Today we're experiencing over 200 calls with no ambulances waiting to be dispatched.
Police across Metro Vancouver say they have responded to more than 100 sudden deaths since the heat dome blanketed BC. Paramedics say they were already overwhelmed before this. BC's chief coroner now says between Friday and yesterday, 233 deaths were recorded across BC. It's now working to see if excessive heat played a role.
Everybody's conscientiously making the decision to not turn on their own stove, which means that we're turning on ours. We're super happy to do it. Everybody's been so lovely, but be mindful of the fact that we might move a little bit slower.
Spare a thought for people who still have to work in this heat as more people return to restaurants for meals and maybe some air conditioning. Businesses are asking customers for a bit of understanding. WorkSafe has already urged some employers to close work sites if they cannot ensure workers are protected from the heat.
We'll be lifting the orders on personal gatherings. We'll be looking at increasing capacity around organized gatherings, both indoor and outdoor settings.
And get ready for more COVID restrictions to ease on schedule. As of Thursday, July 1st, the province is lifting BC's pandemic state of emergency as part of our Stage 3 restart. Masks will no longer be mandatory, but they're still recommended. Scientists are sounding the alarm that this heat wave is part of a larger trend of climate change.
As the climate is warming, we should expect to get more warm events, fewer cold events. And so this type of extreme heat is the sort of thing that scientists have been warning about for decades, right? That this is going to become more common because of climate change.
While we're not in store for summer-long heat waves yet, BC can expect more extreme weather in the future. Donner warns without drastic drops in greenhouse gas emissions, this new normal, if we can call it that, will continue to go up. With this heat comes increased health risks. As we saw in Susanna's story, it's proving deadly across parts of Metro Vancouver and BC. For more on the heat and its impact, we're joined by Dr. Sarah Henderson. She's the Scientific Director of Environmental Health at the BC Centre for Disease Control. She researches the impacts of air pollution and extreme weather events. Dr. Henderson, first of all, what do you make of the fact that police in Metro Vancouver say they've responded to more than 100 sudden deaths since this extreme heat wave hit BC?
Yeah, it really makes me so sad to hear that this is where we're at in the city. We won't have the data at the BC CDC necessary to examine this for a few more weeks yet, but you can rest assured that we will be looking back very carefully to understand the impacts of this event for the population.
Why is it so challenging to count whether people die from extreme heat?
It's challenging because of the way we record deaths. We don't have a checkbox that says extreme heat on a death certificate. So generally people die of all the things they die of normally, heart attacks and respiratory failure, and that's what gets recorded. So we really need to use statistical methods to tease apart the people who died because they were going to die anyhow and the people who died because it was hot.
We understand people with pre-existing health conditions are more vulnerable to this heat. What about a socioeconomic divide?
There's a really big socioeconomic divide in the data that we've looked at for the 2009 event, and there's a few reasons for this. One, simply access to air conditioning. Two, where you work. I'm working in an air-conditioned building today. Lots of people with lower socioeconomic status are working outdoors. Three, the built environment that you live in. The more means you have, the more likely you are to have very protective surrounding green space, rather than being in a very hot urban environment. So there's a lot of different risk factors that pile up on that socioeconomic indicator.
Will this extreme heat wave change how you calculate illness and death? And if so, how?
Like I said, we're going to have to look back at this very carefully in the coming weeks as we get the data necessary to do so. I think it probably will make changes. The 2009 event here really opened our eyes to the fact that extreme heat can be a problem in the region, and this event, I think, will have a similar impact on the way we research these events and potentially the policies that we put in place around them.
And lastly, Dr. Henderson, you've been studying this for years. What is it like to have such an extreme weather event crash on our province like this?
It's both extremely sad and also not surprising for me. If you study climate and its anticipated effects in this region, the event that we're having now aligns well with what has been predicted. So I think we're really going to need to look back at this and use it to help us understand how to protect the population in the years and decades ahead as the climate continues to change.
Dr. Sarah Henderson, thank you for your time and your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
As the extreme heat dome moves east, Alberta is now sweltering. Temperature records are being shattered as the Prairie provinces bake. And there's a look at the North Shore of Vancouver tonight. A pullback from Burrard Inlet. Hot here too, but not quite as hot as it has been on the South Coast. Elsewhere in the province, as we've seen, still very hot. Johanna is up after the break on what's expected in the coming days. Stick around.
I was working backstage on a production of The Nutcracker, and one of the dancers after the show decided to throw out her shoes, and I picked them out of the garbage and tried them on, and then they fit, and in that I just fell in love with what point was and dancing. Hi, my name is BB Brunges. I'm a student here at George Brown College.
How do you feel when you're dancing on point?
It's the power and the strength and the elegance. It's just a very well-rounded practice.
Kind of going against the grain in some of the old ways that ballet and point can be traditional. Was there any nervousness on your end, pitching, that you do point?
Oh, absolutely. There were moments where I felt like I hadn't been taken seriously as a performer. There were also times where I felt like I had to suppress my femininity and really overcompensate because of that. Being at George Brown and applying to the school, all of my interviews beforehand, I was very diligent in mentioning that I wanted to focus on being feminine and really embracing that side of me. And so when Point showed up, I was like, okay, this is a risk, because in my head, I was thinking that it was like some sort of scientific reason why I shouldn't be doing Point. Like, come to think of it, that was very naive. But when I thought about it, I was like, okay, why not? Like, it's just something that's gonna add on to my training, and I don't think any of my teachers are going to speak against that.
The more diversity of people you have with a skill, the more creativity you're going to infuse into what comes out of that skill. And so I really look forward to seeing how that translates as more and more people of all different, skills and creativities and, genders are dancing on Point.
I'm so pleased to see the growth of our art form and to see it changing with society, and we could do a better job of changing faster, but I'm glad that it is changing.
What do you want kids who are gender nonconforming and see you doing this, what do you want them to think or feel?
I can do it too, but they're way more than just shoes. Being an example for people to see something that they don't typically see. It's just exciting, and I want anyone to know that they can do it and that it doesn't matter what other people think. It's what makes you feel good.
When your backyard is burning, is anywhere safe? I'm Adrienne Lamb, the host of a new podcast, World on Fire. Join us on the front lines of wildfires burning around the world. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
As this heat wave lingers and may be linked to several deaths across the Lower Mainland, it's just as hot on the prairies, with Alberta the country's hotspot today. And as the CBC's Paige Parson reports, it's hitting vulnerable Albertans especially hard.
Handing out water and bananas in central Edmonton, this outreach worker took a day off her job to try to help those who have no place to shelter from the heat.
There's going to be a lot of people and going to be ending up in the hospital and being really, really sick from this because some of them don't know how to look after themselves.
With temperatures in the high 30s across many parts of the province, Alberta is Canada's hotspot today, putting pressure on the vulnerable, the elderly, and the very young. Many Edmonton homes don't have air conditioners, leaving parents scrambling to find ways to keep kids cool.
We hibernate in the basement because it's a little cooler down there, and we are trying to survive with our stand fan.
This mom has been driving all over the city looking for a fan for her son with no luck. She stays up during the night, trying to keep him cool with cold towels.
There's only so much I can do to try and keep him cool because we don't have central air, we don't have AC, and we currently don't have any fans.
In rural Alberta, farmers are feeling the heat as their crops are pushed into survival mode.
So what it means in the long run is a yield that's not going to be up to our average. In fact, it could be way below the average in a lot of areas.
Livestock are having trouble keeping cool as well.
So pigs don't sweat. So we need to really make sure that they have a lot of mud and it's actually a natural sunscreen.
The warnings to hydrate, cover up with sunscreen and hats, and seek shade are expected to last through the week. Alberta is expected to break more high temperature records before finally getting some relief Friday. Paige Parsons, CBC News, Edmonton.
As the heat dome moves out of southern BC, the mercury is climbing in cities and towns across the northern regions of our province. The high today in Prince George hit 39 degrees. The same story even farther north in Dawson Creek. And Smithers hit 36 degrees today as well. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now once again with the full forecast. Joe, what is next? Any relief?
We will be talking about some slight relief in the forecast for the South Coast. We've got a bit of a developing wildfire situation just south of Fort Nelson. You're looking at BC Drive cameras, and you can see as that fire in the background grows rapidly in size. So right now, Highway 97 is closed in both directions because of this rapidly developing fire. It sounds like it's the merging of two fires. It has grown rapidly in size today, over 3,000 hectares. Again, this is the Alaska Highway just south of Fort Nelson. We're looking to get more details from the BC Fire Department later on tonight, but a very serious situation. There is a chance, and again, this is not being confirmed as I show you the location on the map, that this may have been started by lightning strikes. I am seeing lightning in that area throughout the day. As the dome shifts eastward, it sort of opens the door to instability, and that is what many of us forecasters are very concerned about across the province. I want to take you back down south. The other a big side of the story, of course, is how oppressive this heat has been for the South Coast. It is still 29 degrees in YVR. You factor in the humidity, it still feels like 35 at Vancouver Airport, feeling like the mid-30s right through the Fraser Valley. This is a good 10 degrees cooler than where most of us were at yesterday. And here's a snapshot of the forecast tomorrow through the heat dome, still very much in place for the BC interior. We won't be breaking Canada's all-time records again, but we'll be seeing some oppressive temperatures. We'll see a bit of that marine air for Metro Vancouver tomorrow, especially with some more clouds rolling in. I'm really hoping it feels a little better tomorrow afternoon. We might have to wait until Thursday and Friday to really feel those ocean breezes. Look at these temperatures, though. I'm taking you right through to the weekend, still forecasting for 24, 25, 26 in through YVR. That would be a story into itself. And you can see the heat dome does abate a little bit for the interior. That is still very, very high stuff, though. High pressure, this massive dome high up in the atmosphere is shifting eastward. And as I mentioned, that's opening the door to instability. You can see those pop-up thunderstorms as I take you through the forecast tomorrow afternoon. Thunderstorms across the province. That's going to be a big story. I'm going to be watching that very closely over the next 24 hours. One more day of 40-degree temperatures for Kelowna. Let's take a look at Vancouver, though. We've got temperatures still hitting the high 20s for one more day with a humidex still feeling like the mid-30s. Once we get into Thursday, I'm hoping, again, that marine air mixes its way in. We're still dealing with extremely poor air quality across Metro Vancouver. I've seen some readings earlier today. They're sort of in line with wildfire smoke readings of last fall. However, the haze and the smoke and the haze and the smog, I should say, you're seeing out there right now, that's associated with low-level pollution. So no real change in that forecast. I've got to take you back to just a look at the Kelowna with the 44-degree forecast for tomorrow. So again, just a touch cooler, still looking to break, possibly some BC all-time records. And then that's the relief, Dan. Through the weekend into early next week. Just incredible that we don't get that big cold front. And then also still worried about lightning strikes. So very much a developing situation over the next 24 hours.
Lots to keep an eye on. Johanna, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So when you think of a desert, ice is probably the last thing that springs to mind. Until now.
Hot, like you feel tingling and like energy, like all over your body. Rejuvenating.
Okay then. She's one of a group of people who drove into a Middle East desert to sit in a bucket of ice, naturally. The idea is to take people out of their comfort zones and boost their immune systems. The Swiss man who runs the session says he is a passionate hot and cold person, and judging by the reactions of people doing the desert version of the polar bear plunge, he's not alone. Are you feeling the heat in BC right now? The CBC's Meng Wanzhou shows us how to make 3 of her favorite Indian drinks to help make that hot weather a bit more bearable.
So it's a hot day, a sweltering day, and you need a solution to cool down. I have one. Well, 3. You see, growing up in Jubbi, these were the cold drinks myself, my family, those around India, and neighboring countries sip for the summers. And we even enjoy them here in Canada. I'm Meng Wanzhou with CBC News, and I'm going to share with you my go-to cold drinks. The go-to drink is Ruafza. It's a pink drink made from rose syrup, and it literally means soul refresher in Urdu. You can buy the syrup from most Indian supermarkets or even online. Start by adding the syrup. Now, some water, milk, and ice. Give it a stir. And let's top it off with some extra syrup and ground pistachios. The next drink is made with cardamom syrup, and it's called ilachi sharbat. It's not as popular as the rose one, but it's made similarly. This is another syrup you can commonly find in Indian supermarkets. Add the green syrup. Water is optional, so I decided to add milk. Next, add ice and stir. And garnish with ground pistachios and almonds. Lastly, we have mango lassi. Lassi is a yogurt or buttermilk-based drink that's very popular in North India. Usually the common way to have lassi is plain, but let's face it, mangoes are great. Start with some fresh sliced mango. Next, add milk or almond milk, plain yogurt. Low fat is recommended for the right consistency, and then blend. Now we add in some ice and serve chilled. And there you have it. If you have any unique recipes that help you cool down, let us know.
I want one right now. You can always find our news program online at cbc.ca/BC. Thank you for watching tonight. Our next local news is right here at 11 o'clock after the National with Tanya Fletcher. Good night, stay cool, and a reminder, please check on your elderly neighbors, those with compromised immune systems. Make sure they're doing okay. Take care, stay cool.